Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Reflections of the Father's Heart. I'm your host, Sandi Derby. I'm joined by a special guest this week, somebody that I've actually come to work really closely with. This is Taylor Leys, and he's the owner of Jesus on Every Screen, which is a social media agency. He has a very strong purpose and a very strong message. And it's kind of interesting because we were talking about some stuff like a few weeks ago, and I went, oh, no, you have to be on the podcast. So thank you for being here today, Taylor.
I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
It's a little different, to go from being the person who's promoting other people and kind of being behind the scenes to like, here we are in conversation.
I know it's been funny because I'm like, I love helping people do exactly this and coach them and everything. But now I'm on the side of it where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have to remember everything I've coached people. I need to like remember those things and not like get nervous or anything. So this is great. And actually I'll just say this is my first podcast interview. So I'm excited to do this. This is probably the beginning of something really special. So
That is amazing.
mhm.
Well, I feel like you have so much to share because there's so much that you've learned, and there is such a Holy Spirit wisdom and passion to what you do.
Yeah.
So, can you start, just tell us a little bit about just you, where you live, how
Yeah.
you got into this?
Yeah. So I grew up in the church. I'm 36 years old, and grew up in the church, and then had some rocky times in my mid or early 20s, leading up into my 30s, where I just left God and was just done with the Lord. And then just God was like, "Well, I'm not done with you." So he gripped me, got me back in my when I was 30, and he just totally blew me away. And I actually got invited to travel the world with a worship pastor, a worship leader who's world renowned, and traveled with him for 3 years. And I did all his social media. I did everything he asked, like from just building normal content, engagement, like building out his worship coaching program, everything. Did that with him for 3 years, and it was really special. I learned a whole lot, and I started to realize, like, oh my goodness, like this, I knew it was the future because I had social media, but just the impact we're reaching millions of people a week, and people's lives are getting changed and all of that. I'm like, wow, this is great. So the time I was done with him, I was like, wow, I helped one person accomplish all this. What if I can help everyone else? Like, what if I can help churches, kingdom businesses, ministries, authors, just anyone who loves Jesus and wants to just get the message out, what they're doing for the Lord, but also just the gospel. So I found a friend of mine. His name is Seth Dahl, and he had this company, Jesus on Every Screen, that he founded. And I was like, "Hey man, what's up?" And he said, "Hey dude, why don't you come join me?" And so we both came in together and dreamed together. And then I became owner with Seth, and now we have Jesus on Every Screen, which we specialize in custom content that is up to date, modern, that reaches people all over the world, or even in your region, in your local area. So we have, we keep up to date with everything. So we help the client or the partner that we have, the partnership, we help them reach people and utilize social media because it's taking over the world. And I mean, you see it, everyone sees it, like the how crazy social media has become, to where it has literally shifted culture and completely taken over culture, and even like brainwash culture. Like there's like the numbers are insane now. Like millennial and Gen Z, I try to stay up to date with the statistics, but in May of this year, they released some statistics that Gen Zers, they are on social media and the internet 4.5 hours to 7 hours a day. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, how is that possible? Are they like, what are they? I thought they're in school, all that, but they just find ways, but they're on it all day long. And it just blew my mind. I'm like, those just in one day, they have surpassed the number of times that those kids or those young adults are in church or in around a healthy culture or around a healthy friend or a healthy family or healthy gathering. Like literally in one day, they surpass that number that they would be in a whole month. So when you look at that data, I'm like, what is the church doing about that? And I'll just say it, like, from what we've seen and all the stuff we were looking at, the darkness is winning on the enemy's winning on social media. And it's really sad to say that, but it's true. But we're starting to really make a shift now to where we're going to change that here pretty soon. So yeah.
What I really appreciate about that, Taylor, is, I think about the scripture that talks about, on earth as it is in heaven. And I always interpret that as part of our mission here is to take back territory for the Lord. We are commissioned to go out. We're, commissioned to make disciples, but we're commissioned in doing that to take back territory. So
Yeah.
when you said, darkness is winning on social media, I feel like the mindset shift that we as believers should have is, instead of looking at it like social media is just all bad and just stay away from it. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with fasting from it and not being
Mhm.
so inundated with it. What if instead we were looking at it as territory to be gained for Jesus versus just an evil thing to try to keep everybody away from, because the kids are not staying away from it, to your point.
Yeah, exactly. Because we have a few lines that we use a lot, but like, whatever you behold, you become.
Mhm.
So if you are just beholding social media and consuming the knowledge, the the tips and tricks to live life to your fullest, if you're on there just consuming, even like the scriptures of like the eyes are the windows to your soul. I mean, like, with your eyes, what you're viewing in social media is affecting your soul. It's affecting your spirit, your heart, your mind. And so another saying that we have with our company is, where we're the attention at, the harvest is. And so what if we shift that and look at it as, like, what if I can make a clip? What if I can make a video that just says, "Hey, are you dealing with depression today? Can I pray for you?" And you just pray, and then that's all you do. Like, it's nothing, like, because looking at social media, everyone wants something, everyone wants you to do something, all that. But what if we go at it as like, hey, I'm going to give you a blessing, I'm going to give you a powerful prayer that you will be healed from depression after you watch this reel. And it takes like 30 seconds. But right now, like, on social media, you see witchcraft, you see witches teaching you how to cast spells and teaching you how to get close to Satan. But the church, you see them, hey, why don't you come to my Easter egg hunt? Hey, why don't you come to my Christmas service? But we don't see the church even doing this simple basic thing where it's like, hey, do you know how to read your Bible? Hey, do you know how to read, or do you know how to pray about this? Hey, like, we can go down the list. Like, I'm on social media a lot. I'm not as much as a Gen Z or millennial, but I'm on it a lot, just studying and researching what the church is doing. And it is so rare that I rarely see a church do that very thing. I rarely see a church do what the witches are doing, what other people are doing. Like, I mean, I see so many videos of like how to live a good life. Hey, tips on how to do financing, tips how to do this, tips how to do that. See that everywhere. But the church, they don't do any of that. So the church is really focused on, not all churches, but from what I'm seeing, I mean, and you can try to convince me, but what you show me is where your heart's at. Like, what I see you doing is where your heart is. So most churches, they're promoting their church. They're not promoting Jesus very well. They're promoting what they are doing. I mean, yes, churches go in, get discipled and everything, but these kids, they're getting discipled on social media 4.5 to 7 hours a day. And so is what when the church, like you said, looking at it as like territory to take, when the church is going to step up and take territory and go after these kids and go after the next generation on social media, I mean, who knows what's going to happen.
I think that's so beautiful because, we were chatting obviously before we got on, and I had shared, I went through kind of a personal experience recently. And, I was having a day where I was on social media a little bit more than I normally am. And I was just, on some reels. And it was amazing to me how God actually supernaturally spoke through some of the content
Yeah.
that I saw. It was a blessing. There were things that
Yeah.
hit me, in a Holy Spirit way. And yet, to your point, there's also a lot of darkness and witchcraft, and obviously things that I'm just going to quickly scroll past.
Mhm.
But these are things that can grab young people's attention. And the other thing that was coming to me, and I know we're going to talk about, the rise in suicide and depression and anxiety
Mhm.
and all those types of things, but
Yeah.
I know there is a statistic, you're probably more familiar with it than I am, of even the suicide rate like in teenage girls, and the
Yes.
depression rates and the things that have gone up since they've gotten on social media,
Mhm.
because we're in an age of filters, and you see people on social media that look perfect, and there's a lot more comparison, as I think
Mhm.
probably especially for young girls, that's happening.
Yep.
And so can you speak to those numbers a bit on in terms
Mhm.
of what you've seen?
Yeah, so last year a whistleblower came out from Meta, and they said that, and I mean Facebook is on, Meta's getting sued a lot recently, but one of the workers there, they had data showing that they knew that young girls were spending a lot of time on social media doing a certain thing, like showing their bodies, doing dancing, showing their, bikinis, things like that, and they saw that that was getting so much attention that they championed that. But what they started to notice with the data that they're collecting is suicide rates skyrocketed in young girls because of that. And so they, instead of making this switch, like, you know what, we're not going to reward those girls because it's leading to suicide. They're like, we're going to reward those girls not caring that they're killing themselves. And it's like they didn't care about lives. They only cared about views and money. And so, and it's still happening today. Comparison, especially with these young kids, there's such a rebellious spirit right now between kids and parents. I mean, look what just happened in California with Newsom. Like he decided, like, hey, we're gonna let publicly in all the school systems, we're gonna let these kids hide the fact that they may be going through some mental illness stuff, and then the school's going to hide that from the parents, and we're going to let them decide what they want to do but not encourage the parents. Maybe you need to have some conversations, healthy stuff, healthy cultures. Like they're creating this dark culture in the school system in California, but now they're allowing this gap to get even wider and wider and wider. And there's more to that bill that I've read, but I mean, it's just that. I mean, and you probably know this as well because of your field and that you're in, but like these kids that are going through identity issues, they are watching all these reels from all these people going through mental illness stuff. And those mental illness people are actually discipling them into mental illness. And it's like, wait, what? Like, so you have this person who's a drag dressed up, is clearly a man but pretending to be a woman, and then they're telling them and feeding people all these young kids, hey, guess what, do you feel like you're a girl sometimes and you're a man though, but guess what, you're the, and it's just that is discipleship. And we don't step back and look at it that way. And so we kind of step back and like, what can we do about that? So there's a lot of like things that the church can do. I mean, you don't even have to be a church, you can just be an individual who loves Jesus, and you can use some fun one liners to start. Like one thing I like to do is like get people hooked in and get them kind of little like, ooh, I don't like that, but then my next line is the correct thing. So I recently saw one guy who said, hey, I'm a pastor of a church and I agree with gender transformation or something like that. And they said, yeah, and so the way I believe it is, having your God-given image, how God created you, and it transforms you into a new creation, and all this stuff. And but the beginning of it made you cringe because you're like, oh great, you're just another pastor who's gone whack. But they turned it into something else. So if you like study and research like what people are doing that is leading towards suicide, depression, all that, if you look at that and flip it to Jesus and make a piece of content, you never know who you can save. And I mean, and I look back on this and I don't share this story a lot, but my little brother, he's on social media, and he passed away a couple years ago, and he had some back pain, and he was just dealing with pain in his body. And so a friend of his was like, "Hey man, here, I have this painkiller, it should help you." Not knowing, none of them knew this, but not knowing the painkiller actually had fentanyl. And so my brother took it not knowing that, and ended up taking his life. And I'm like, I was devastated, destroyed our family. And I mean, I look at that, I'm like, man, what if like a local pastor, or like what if a church, or what if someone like just made a piece of content and ran an ad or something that just said like, "Hey, are you feeling pain in your body? Do you need healing? Can I just pray for you real quick? I believe Jesus heals today." And then someone's like, "Jesus, thank you for this person that's watching this. Jesus, thank you. I just believe for healing," and blah blah blah. And if the person's prophetic, like, "I believe for healing in the back." And what if my brother's back was healed and he never got to take that pill? And then I'm like, oh my God, like that just like blew my mind, because I'm like, what if I can help the church? What if I can help coach and teach people how to do this, to where they present the gospel that brings about healing and saves lives, to where like these young girls, suicide rates going through, and all of a sudden we have these mamas, and or even young girls speaking the gospel, and they get healed and they don't kill themselves. We can go down the list, like depression, sadness, loneliness. I mean, we can just, what if we make content surrounding those topics? And then, you never know whose life you can change. So for me, I'm like, I'm going up against the fentanyl, crisis. And I'm like, I'm going to make content that we can. So we have some clients, they make content that they're praying healing over people's lives. So they don't need to take any kind of painkiller or anything, but praying healing. So like, you never know whose lives you're going to save. You may not know till you get to heaven, but one day we'll learn how to collect that data. But I mean, you never know like what can happen. You never know what brothers' lives can be saved, just by making something really simple, like a small prayer. And again, you don't have to be a Christian, or you don't have to be a church to do it, or a ministry, or an author. You can just be a person who loves Jesus, and you're like, "Hey, you know what? Can I just pray for you today?" And then, you never know.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that testimony and your heart behind it, it's so powerful, because even thinking of, your little brother, I would imagine too, because a lot of times when people are dealing with pain in their body, like back pain and those kinds of things, it can get weighty, and you can feel
Yeah.
depressed, and you can feel like you're not yourself also, in addition to that. So like you said, if there's people out there that are reaching people on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
that can be such a tremendous support and such a tremendous help. And it can take, I again, I will say personally, and I do, as you know, I put content out there because I work with you guys, but
Yeah.
I have been in that moment where somebody said a prayer and it's hit me at the right time, and it's been wow. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we need so much more of that in ways that will reach people. I think
Yeah.
that's so, I mean, I just think that's so powerful and so beautiful. And I really appreciated what you said too about the meta and the lawsuit, and how they're driving these algorithms, or they're seeing things like, oh, young girls are showing their bodies and this is driving a lot of traffic. And so they're increasing that. And then yet when they see the suicide rates go up, they put that data aside because it was still bringing traffic.
Yeah.
And that's the evil, right? Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
evil that we want to combat,
Mm-hmm.
because if we're putting content out there and it's reaching people and that's also driving numbers, well, they're
Mm-hmm.
just going to go with whatever drives numbers, but that can be on purpose for God. So I think
Yeah.
that's really amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, we serve a creative God. Like, God is the ultimate creator. He is so creative. And if we're designed by him, if we're created by him to be, we should be creative people. Like but we've, because of technology and because of all this stuff that's out there now, especially on social media, there's been tests that have gone out where the creative levels have completely just dropped in people, like their imagination, their creativity, their dreams, they just have completely dropped because they're spending so much time watching all these others that they can't create themselves. They just carbon copy, and then we have all these copycats. We don't have anything new. And so, like, and I mean, you see it all over social media. I mean, everyone copies, like, ooh, this worked. I'm going to copy them exactly and say exactly what they say because this worked. And it's like, cool, man. Well, what about something prophetic that's on your heart? Like, I've seen some prophetic accounts where they just do daily prophetic stuff that God's showing them, and they are blowing up because it's new, it's fresh, it's from the Lord. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. It doesn't look cool at all. It's actually really old school, and it just like looks terrible. For myself as an editor, as a designer, like all that, I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. But the thing is, it is impacting people because it is something fresh. It is something new. It's creative, and it's art through words. But I mean, it's thinking of that, like, we're all designed to be creative, like, and that's just in our DNA. And if we're able to step out there and stop judging yourself or stop comparing yourself, like, and I mean, I'm speaking to myself right now because I've delayed building content because of judgment on myself or comparison to myself. Or I'm like, I just want this to look perfect because of what I do. I'm like, I want it to look perfect. So, but the thing is, I'm like, wait a minute, my testimony, my connection with the Lord, just like dreams I've had, prophetic things I've seen and have heard, I'm like, man, what if I just share that today and it changes someone's life today that I missed if I would have waited weeks, months, years to do, you know?
That is so true. I have to say, what you said about creativity, I feel like this is something I've been talking a lot about recently. And I cannot remember who the doctor or scientist was that did the study from what organization. I'm going to have to get that data, but it's data. Basically, they were somebody that would study people and study creative levels, right? So
Mhm.
they were, because they were seeking adults for a job that required like a creative genius level. Well, they went and did a study on children, and they took a group of kids that were like maybe 4 and 5 years old, and they found it was in the high 90 percentile of those children that actually registered as creative geniuses. And
Wow.
so what this person did is they used that as a study group as they went up in age. And as they went up in age, less and less percentage of those kids were registering as creative geniuses. And by the time they got into adulthood, it was actually a very small percentage of that group that would test as a creative genius. And so it
Mhm.
goes right back to what you're saying. Like, we're made in the image of God, and we reflect his creativity. It's actually what sets us apart from everything else, is that we can create from thought. We can have a thought and it can birth something, because that's who God is. And
Mhm.
so we're born with that nature. And I believe because of the, systemization, and whether you want to call it social media or systems, it takes children out of imagination and creativity and
Mhm.
intuitiveness that they're naturally born with. And then we become less and less. But our nature is to be creative. So we can take something like social media, which may in some ways be being used for bad things, and go, but God, why not infiltrate that? Why not take back territory in all of these creative ways? Because the Lord is bigger. And could God just swoop his hand in and do all of it? Sure. But
Yeah.
he wants to co labor with us, he wants to partner with us, just
Mhm.
like he partnered with the Israelites in taking the promised land. It's like, here it is. Now let's walk together to take it over and have this territory. So I
Mhm.
love this conversation, because I feel like it can even encourage people who are out there, who are believers. If something comes on your heart, to just post it, like, just go ahead and put it out there,
Mhm.
instead of the perfectionism, which I can relate to. I feel like, even as we're having this conversation, I'm like, I know I need to be doing more lives. I know I need to be doing that, and I'm going to. But
Mhm.
sometimes it's like early in the morning, and I'm like, I look a hot mess, and I don't want to I don't want to shoot a video right now, even though God might be calling me to, right? So,
Judgment. It's
what
judgment on yourself.
would you say about that, Taylor? Because I feel like that is something that does come up for people, this idea of, I need to look a certain way, or it's got to look a certain way to get out there.
Yeah, and that goes back to the comparison, because you're on social media and you're seeing how the picture perfect, like for yourself, like the females are doing it where they have their makeup, or they found a filter that works, and all of a sudden they just look cool, they know exactly what to say. But I mean, they've had a lot of practice, and that's the thing, is like, if you go back to the very first post of these people who are just legends on social media, they probably were pretty terrible in the beginning. But the thing is you practice and practice and practice. Like, I'm not going to be really good at cooking steak unless I try again. I can go watch a video of how Gordon Ramsay does his steak, and then I'll go and try it. And I'm like, my first try, I'm like, this is terrible. Like, what the? And I could just give up and never do it, or I can keep practicing until I can make a steak better than Gordon Ramsay, which I don't think I can. But it's like, the thing is just understanding, like, there's a difference between comparing yourself and getting inspired. So when you take a hold of inspiration and you actually start to lean on it too much, that's when it turns into envy and comparison. And so that's why, like, get your inspiration and step away, like, and go get with God. But then, even looping it back around, if God said, don't be disobedient. Like, it's disobedient. If God's like, hey, I'm putting this on your heart so you can change someone's life, and you're like, I'm good. Never, no, I'm good, Dad. Never mind. I don't want to listen to you. And I mean, and I'm speaking to myself as well, because God, like, I have like a list of stuff that God's given me, all this inspiration, all these ideas, and I'm just like, I'll just get someone else to do it. But God's been waiting for me to do it, because there's only one me, and like, there's not another me out there. So why am I going to waste my life trying to be someone else that I've seen, and instead of being who God made me to be? And the thing is, there's, like, just in America, there's 300 and I think 30 million people. out
Mhm.
of out of 330 million, 309 or 307 million are on social media. So it's like, not over 90% of Americans, that's just Americans, are on social media. And the thing is we think we have to make content that's going to impact all 300 million. But the thing is like, what if you just impact 100 people, or 1,000 or 2,000? Like, stop thinking huge numbers. Like, think just be obedient with the Lord, because it can take one person that you change their life, and then next thing you know, what if they get on social media and they blow up, and you see healings, miracles, people being saved because of one video you made help someone else. I mean, you have to think of it that way, because these guys from Meta, these social media CEOs and everything, they know what they're doing. They're trying to steal your attention, steal your creativity, make you a robot, buy what they say, do what they say. They have figured you out. So you can partner with God and actually kill the algorithm, or you can just keep being a robot, and just keep going around in circles, and then you wonder why things aren't growing, why aren't fruit coming. It's because it's all artificial. It's not the real thing, you know what I mean?
So true. And I really appreciated even what you said about perfectionism and obedience, because one of the things that I can say, just as a woman and as a woman who's sat with a lot of different women, is I can't tell you how many times I've sat across from a woman who's very beautiful, right? Who hasn't doesn't think that she's beautiful at all. And I
Mm,
feel like comparison is such an attack from the enemy. I think we have to remember, as people, whether we're men or women, Satan was a top dog. Like, he was a top angel. He was up there. He was musical, he was beautiful, he was all of these things, and he was cast out of heaven. And yet we are the Lord's, like, prized possession. We
mm,
have to remember how endlessly and relentlessly he is jealous of us. He's
yeah.
jealous of who we are. He's jealous of our gifts. He's jealous of our standing with God. He's jealous of the authority that the Lord has given us. He has an extreme jealousy. And I heard one person say it about just the demonic in general. They're really, really smart. They're really mentally ill. So Satan is like super intelligent and mentally ill in terms of his jealousy. And you know what I mean? Like he's psychotic, right? Like he's
Mhm.
psychotic. And so we have to remember that he's also trying to hook us. Now, we know what the scriptures say. You know, the
Mhm.
one who's in us is greater than the one who's in the world. It's not that we need to hyper focus on him, but Paul does say we are not unaware of his schemes. Perfectionism, comparison,
Mhm.
there's a reason that that ends up being a result of the darkness on social media, because like you said, these execs have this plan, they know what they're doing, and yet where is evil gonna funnel through? It's going to funnel through the greed, it's going to funnel through the dumbing down people. And so I
Yeah.
think we need to also remember that, you know, he's jealous of you. He's
Mhm.
jealous of what you carry. And when you allow his plan to stifle you, then you're kind of falling into a trap. Versus, and I've definitely done it, it's not easy. Versus, God gave you something so special that only certain people are going to connect with. And whether you're, even if you're somebody that's like, Sandy, I'm not somebody that posts on social media, you know, I'm not somebody that regularly does that. That's fine. But if God puts something on your heart, do it.
Mhm.
Whether it's saying something to a person, whether it's putting something out there. I
Yeah.
think we've got to stop this idea that, you know, all content is bad, and start to realize what you've said is that we now have something where we could really reach people, and the enemy wants to stifle us in every single area of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's right. Because, I mean, going back to the schemes of the enemy, I mean, thinking about it, his schemes doesn't change. It's
No.
been the same since the beginning of age. Like, he's going to go after your mind. Like, he's going to attack your mind because your mind is connected to your heart and your heart's to your soul and your spirit. And I'm like, thinking about it while you were saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's always going to go after the mind. And I mean, because look at the battle right now against mental illness. It is through the roof. I mean, it is like, it's just taking over the next generation. And I mean, I have to say, when I was a teenager, when I was in these kids' shoes, I don't even remember hearing about mental illness ever. Like back in the 90s and early 2000s, I don't remember hearing so much about mental illness. And then even in the word anxiety, I didn't know what that word meant until I had an anxiety attack when I was like 25, and I'm like, what is this? And but the thing is I didn't know any of this
Yeah.
because I wasn't surrounded by it. I didn't hear the voices and all of it. But now that I'm hearing mental illness, depression, anxiety, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I depressed? Oh my gosh, do I have mental illness? And I start leaning on that truth or that lie. And then next thing I know, I'm going crazy. But where did it start? It started from a whisper, it started from something. And so like that's like that affected my mind. And so looking, I'm like, so the enemy schemes, we know what they are, like you said.
Mm.
So what are we going to do about it? Are we just going to let him? He's not going to win at the end. But that's the other thing. Like Christians, a lot of Christians are pretty lazy when it comes to like, like we know we're going to win. So like we're good. Like so they'll just live this boring life of like we're good. We know we're going to win at the end of the age. But it's like, but what about my little brother? But what about my cousins? What about my aunts, my uncles? What about like what if they're? I mean, I feel like all of them are pretty good, but what if one of them is just like going down the worst path ever, and they're so depressed and so lonely and all this, and I don't even know. But the thing is, I'm like, so what about them? And I mean, yeah, you're good, but don't be so selfish, Mr. Christian. Like let's kind of like we can reach hundreds of thousands to millions of people, and I mean, we could save lives.
I I really appreciate that, because I feel like a lot of the information that's out there, you know, when you're talking about mental illness and anxiety and depression and all these kind of things, it's almost like giving information, telling people things, creating those whispers, but also not giving any solutions. It's, here's a label, take the label, and this is what it is,
Yeah.
versus there's a solution for this. There's a solution. And I'm somebody, and from all my content, where I'm like, there's been breakthrough and there's been process, but at every point, the solution was Jesus. The
Yeah.
hope was Jesus. And I so appreciate what you said about so many believers that want to just sit back and go, either it's, well, I know the end, or I'm just trying to make it to heaven, versus, wait a minute, this is participatory. God
Yeah.
didn't just have us be born and, you know, learn about Jesus and become a believer to just sit back. If that was the case, we'd go to heaven as soon as we were saved. But we
Hmm.
don't. We have a role here, we have a
Hmm.
purpose here. God gives us an opportunity to partner with Him in so many different ways. And that's the exciting part about our time here is what am I supposed to do? What is my essence? I love what you said too about trying to be like other people. It's terrible. You weren't born that way. Yes, we have an interdependency, but we're not supposed to emulate someone else. We're supposed to be who Jesus created us to be. And so stepping into that and stepping into that with God is exciting. It's not easy. The attacks come, I have my battles, I have my things, but stepping out with the Lord is the best thing we could ever do here. And so I
Yeah.
think you're so right. There's too many believers out there that are sitting back and not being a part of the solution and
Hmm.
not getting creative about how to do it. And that's why I love the name Jesus on every screen. I love what you guys are about. I love what you want to do. I think you're going to need to get out there a lot more
Hmm.
because what an amazing thing to be able to do. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, I've been blessed by content on social media where God has spoken to me at just the right time. And I'm like, we need way, way more of this because
Yeah.
God is utilizing this. And imagine if you're in a remote place, like we've talked about the US, but what about people that live in a remote place where they may have a phone, they may have social media, they
Hmm.
might not have access even to a church.
Yeah.
But what if they're being reached in
Hmm.
those ways? It
Yeah.
just can have global implications, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was saying this with Seth, my business partner, and I was like, because our goal, Jesus on every screen, is to till every eye, until every ear hears, every eye sees. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like our company is literally ushering in the return of the King, like return of Jesus. And I'm like, we could literally be the reason why Jesus comes back. Like, and it just blows my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I have a lot of people praying for us, but I mean, it's just like we want to go after everyone because like going even circling back to who we are. But the thing is we've seen this huge exodus from the church. Everyone's like a lot of people left the church during 2020. So where did they all go? And so we want to help the church fill their seats again. We want to help the church grow. So we're like, let's utilize social media because that's where everyone's attention's at. So let's utilize social media. Let them know, hey, we're here, we're healthy, we're a healthy church. Why don't you come to our church? Let's build community discipleship, and then they disciple, so on and so forth. But then your kingdom business, I'm like, hey, let's make your business be like hundreds of millions of dollars to where you can actually like go buy a building, start a nonprofit that helps sex trafficking victims get healed up, or help buy a building that, used to be a strip club, but then you turn it into a church, so we want to help, the kingdom just flourish utilizing, the thing that's actually killing this culture. So we want to it's like I'm super fascinated with agriculture in the Bible, but like the social media is like this field, this like ripe field that we can go in and till the ground and just really mess it up and get it prepared to plant some beautiful, beautiful things to where it's going to grow and the fruit. And I mean, it just like if you think about it, take a step back, like what can social media be for your business or for your church, your ministry, for even as an individual? I mean, like imagine, dream with God on that. If you have a heart towards it, then dream with God on it. But then also like, hey, if you don't have a heart but you just love, all the goodness on it, just share, comment, like share these people's stuff, like because you never know who's your friend or family following you that will see something that you posted, I posted, whoever, and then all of a sudden they get healed. So maybe you don't have a calling to like make the content, but share it. share it, and you never know whose life you may impact.
I think that is such a great charge for people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
whether your dream is whatever God is put on your heart, and if social media is a part of that, don't be afraid of it. But at the same time, yeah, let's share the good content. Let's
Mm-hmm.
like the good stuff. Let's perpetuate that getting in front of more and more and more people,
Mm-hmm.
because we have an option and an ability to impact people like never before. Just
Yeah.
because things that got impacted in a dark way doesn't mean that that can't then be transformed into the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
So I think that is so, so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that, Taylor. I want to
Mm-hmm.
ask you,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there may be somebody that's listening that has maybe even been called to be on social media, to share
Mm-hmm.
on social media, to bring a testimony. I think the power of testimony, we
Mm-hmm.
don't give it enough weight. I just want to share this super quick that
Yeah.
I heard this guy, he used to be he's an ex-Satanist. He was in another country. And one of the things that he talked about is that when believers release their testimony, it literally messes them up when they are trying to attack like a region or a city or a church.
Wow.
When we release testimony, it there's a power in the spirit realm that we can't even imagine. So there may be somebody listening, Taylor, who is feeling a nudge to share something or release something, or, you know, listen, I want to tell people out there, as somebody who leads a podcast, me or other people, if connect with people who are doing podcasts, if you have a testimony to release, because, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that might be content that should be out there. But I'm imagining, Taylor, there's people that are going to hear this and feel this nudge of, yeah, I should be putting something out there, but then they're still afraid. So I want you to go ahead and just speak into that before we
Yeah.
finish.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I literally had this conversation yesterday with my wife, and I was like, "Hey babe, I'm doing my first podcast tomorrow." She's like, "Oh, awesome." And I was like, "Yeah, but I mean, I'm just a little nervous though. I don't know if I should share too much of my testimony or what." She's like, "Why?" And I told her, I'm like, "Well, cuz honestly, like I don't care about other people's like judgment or anything, but like I care about what you may feel or think." And she's like, "What? Why?" It's like, "Well, you're my wife." And she's like, "I know, but why would you care? I mean, I know everything about you and all this stuff." And I was like, wait a minute, why did I even think that in the first place? Like I was afraid of judgment from people that I love and I know. Like so that's what's like stopping me from like, oh, I live in the what ifs. I live in this like anxiety driven, fear driven what if moment instead of being like, you know what? I'm gonna share because the testimony is just the reflection of Jesus and who he is and his love and everything he's done for like my life was catastrophic. I mean, we can do another podcast and go over that, but man, it was terrible. I was such a dark person. I was like there's one no way no one will ever want to marry me or be with me ever again. But yet I have a wife and she's beautiful and amazing and we have kids and but I'm like why am I not sharing this story? Because there's so many people out there that are living in the darkness thinking they're dark thinking that they have no chance redemption. But what if my words of, hey, guess what, I was there but now I'm here, like that can change their life and that can change their trajectory of where they're heading and that it could lead them to Jesus, which the ultimate goal is Jesus, not me. Like I want to lead people to Jesus, not me. And I think if you're a type of person that's like scared to do it, well, being scared is not from the Lord. So maybe you need to take that to Jesus and say, hey, Lord, help me not to be scared. And then maybe you need to fast from social media a little bit and then go during your fast, go dream with God and get your journal and just write down, just say, God, I know this is in my heart. I know you want me to do this. Let's do this together. Let's dream with me. Let's do like a month worth, and then dream and write it down with the Lord. Don't use chat GPT, just like you dream with God, and then just start doing one simple thing at a time. So like just make one post and ignore the numbers, ignore the data. Just the thing is like be obedient to the Lord. And I'm working on this right now. So I'm saying this, but I'm also encouraging myself because like God's asking me to do something and there's a huge reason behind it. And I've seen this vision, like people have like literally prophesied the same bit. Like I've seen it and people prophesied it. Like there's these doors that I'm afraid to break through that I know I can break through. But I'm just like, I'm staring at them. I'm like, my nose is to the wall and I'm like, I know I can break this wall down. I know I could break this door down. And it's like the wall of like judgment or something. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I know with one punch it'll fall. I know if I just do one little hit, it'll fall. I know that, but I'm afraid of what's behind it. And like some people, I don't know if this is just me, but I'm afraid of the more. Like I'm afraid of like, ooh, if God has more for me, then oh my gosh, that's more responsibility. Oh my gosh, that's more time. I start like like the anxiety takes it, and I am like thinking about the all these what ifs. But then someone told me, and I saw this is like when that wall fell, there were millions of people waiting for me. Like there were millions of people behind the wall waiting for that wall to fall down. And I was like, oh. So I'm like, that's heavy because I'm like, there's millions of people waiting for me to get over my crap so their lives can be changed forever. But they're waiting for me. And I'm like, oh. And so, yeah, so those are just a few things I would encourage, especially someone that's really has a passion but is scared.
Beautifully said. And I feel like those words could be for anybody who's going after
Yes.
everything, anything, honestly. So well said, because I love what you said about being afraid of the more.
Mhm.
Sometimes people are so afraid of failure, and yet a lot of times we're also so afraid of success and so afraid of the more and the responsibility. And what does that mean? And I can't just hide away in comfort because it's this other level and it's this other place. So I think there's a lot of power in that. So thank
There,
you for sharing that. Yeah.
there is, and I actually had a men's group over on Wednesday night. You know, 2 nights ago. We'll say whoever's watching this, whenever, but and we were talking about fear and everything, and talking about my business, all of that, and it's so crazy how two things is one. I was talking to a friend about this, and it's so amazing when the enemy gives you a thought. You don't go get confirmation for it. You don't get prophetic words about it. You don't wait for two birds and three or three worms to fly, and then you see the signs and then you believe it. Like the first time the enemy says something, you attach yourself to that lie and you believe it. But it's funny when God tells you something, we're like, I need two confirmations, I need three dreams. I'm going to wait for all these prophetic words before all this confirmation before I even step into it, and then I'll believe that it's God. And it's amazing how we believe it's like we believe the devil right away, but then when the Lord says something, we wait for all this confirmation. It's like so crazy how we do that. And it got me thinking about like this line I came up with. It's like for some reason, instead of having faith in me succeeding, I have fear in me failing.
Mm.
And I'm just like, I need to get out of that so bad. Like I have so much fear in me failing that is overtaken. Like, wait a minute, I have faith in myself that I actually can succeed because I have Jesus, and he's told me to do this. Like he's told me to do Jesus on every screen. There's so many things that have led to my wife's like, don't give up. God's like, don't give up. And I'm like, I want to give up, this isn't working. And like and but the thing is, like, instead of faith of the success, I'm like, I have the fear of the failure. And I'm working on that today, and like trying to get rid of that and flip it.
I love that.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people need to take that in because I never really thought about that. The the devil can say one thing and we're like, yeah, it's true. And then the Lord
Yeah,
has to speak to us like 10 times and then we're still afraid to walk through the door. It's like,
I
oh my
know.
gosh, no, no, no. I need to make sure. I need to. No, that is absolutely tremendous. And I
Mhm.
think people really, really need to hear that.
Yeah.
So this has been so, so good. I want to let everybody know I will definitely have Jesus on every screen tagged below. If you want to connect with Taylor, if you have any interest in, support and help with social media, with, you know, videos, any of that type of thing, you definitely want to connect with Taylor. I can tell you they do a tremendous job, and it's really beautiful to work with a team of people who are about Jesus and, have that in the culture. So I just want to say that. And if you liked this podcast, if you got something out of it, please like it, please share it. This is how we get out there with this kind of messaging. So thank you so much, Taylor.
So welcome.